Thank you very much. I'm very conscious that I'm standing between you and coffee, so I'll try and keep this as brief as possible. So first off, just thank you for having me. My name is Folkerd. As you can see from my hair, I've been in the industry for over 20 years now. My career path has followed the opposite of David's, so I've come from academia first. I spent a long time doing my PhD thesis looking with the police forces implementing a large national scale information system for their new portal delivery. I then moved into the hosting sector and then spent subsequently the last 18 years architecting and building large scale public clouds both within the UK and specifically within the sovereign market for the defence and police industries. Today, I'm going to be walking through a culmination of some of the lessons that ANS has learnt implementing public sector sovereign clouds from a mixture of different use cases that we've seen, trajectories that we have observed in the industry, and a little bit of forward thinking about where things might be going in the future. We'll start off with a view of the sovereign cloud journey and how we see that maps onto our customer base, go into some of the drivers around sovereignty, the requirements for sovereignty and where that's come from, look a bit about data security and the impacts of GDPR, a bit then around the cloud conundrum and how we aggregate all that together into a usable solution for our customers and a way forward from that. Just as a bit of an introduction to ANS, if you haven't heard of us before, we're one of the largest CSPs in the UK. We're a VMware Pinnacle partner, and we're one of the largest partners for Microsoft in the UK. We have over 2,000 customers across a wide range of industries, from commercial and in the public sector. From a public sector and sovereign environment, we host a wide range of over 100 different public sector customers, and that can be from the NHS and healthcare systems, that can be the police, critical national defence systems, cyber resilience systems for the Cabinet Office. So we've got a lot of different use cases, and we found that every customer in the sector is very different in the way they need to implement. As David talked about at the beginning, there's a huge mixture of use cases, of data requirements, of security that our customers need as they go through. But one of the things that we've seen throughout all of them is that cloud is very much a journey. It's not a case of sovereignty at a single point. It's about the evolution of the organization's technological standpoint as they go through their journey of transformation. We still have a large number of customers that are moving from on-premise DCs, where they have their own standalone infrastructure, and are looking to onboard onto a cloud service. Whether that is just an incremental lift and shift, and they're looking to move their virtualized infrastructure into a managed infrastructure, normally that's into a sovereign infrastructure, or they're looking to go fully cloud native and transform their applications and their workloads. But what we see is that tends to be on a project-by-project basis. A lot of legacy IT will cost billions to move across to the new systems. And what ANS prefers to adopt is more of a lifecycle approach, where we're not just there for a single project, we're there to work with your business as it transforms into cloud native. Be that in Azure, if your data allows for it, be that on VCF, if you want a more sovereign, more secure deployment, or in a multi-cloud approach where you're integrating both of those together. Just as a bit of a view on the UK public sector and how that's evolved over the last few years. Just as many industries, we started off, everyone's got their own DCs, everyone was very reluctant to adopt cloud. We started getting a few specialist CSPs like ourselves in UK cloud that came about that had the capabilities, they had people that have worked from industry, they had a bit more reassurance from the public sector that it was okay to start outsourcing your workloads into those CSPs. In 2012, 2013, we had the launch of G-Cloud, which is the procurement framework within the UK to allow public sector organizations to purchase cloud in a consolidated framework. That then led in 2013 to the Cloud First initiative, where the UK government started to mandate that when you're implementing new systems, you should be going cloud first. As with all UK regulation, a little bit open to interpretation around what that meant, and subsequent trying to get over a lot of the fear of adoption. And I think one of the things that's become clear as cloud's been adopted in the UK, there was the traditional reputation that government is slow, government doesn't adopt new technology. But actually what we found, and you can see in our customer base, is that cloud has been a phenomenal drive for innovation. the speed and pace that cloud has enabled public sector organizations to push out systems that even 5 or 10 years ago would have been impossible is really impressive. But what we're also seeing is now it's not necessarily about hybrid cloud, it's true multi-cloud in their adoption of the technology. And that's brought a lot of complexity and uncertainty along with it. And when we're talking about sovereignty, when we're talking about creating isolated environments that are easy to control, the multi-cloud problem has become very significant. If you look at any large-scale system implementation today, it's not just about connecting a private and hybrid cloud. There's a lot of SaaS services that are being consumed as part of that, whether that's with one of the hyperscalers, whether it's with a CSP, whether it's with a specific service utilizing, and the data aggregation that has to occur with that. AI over the last few years has added an additional complication to that as well. It's given a lot more innovation capabilities, a lot quicker time to market, but with that a lot more complexity, because it's not just about the implementation of technology, it's looking at your data flows, looking at how everything connects together, and can you actually implement that in a sovereign form? And that's been a big challenge for a lot of our customer base, is how you start tying that together. So with that as the basis, there's a lot of drivers within sovereignty in the UK. I wouldn't be on a stage in Europe from the UK if I didn't mention Brexit. I'm really sorry. We're working on that one at the moment. Brexit's been a big driver for change in the UK. It's presented a lot of challenges that I'll talk about as we go through. It's also meant that a lot of regulations that we were previously bound by in Europe are now in flux. There's a lot of need to stay aligned with the EU. There's a lot of drivers to become more flexible in the world stage, and it's causing a lot of balance around large-scale projects where there's a lot of interoperability between nations. We've had enough slides on Trump today, so I won't put any more of those up. But there's a lot of geopolitical drivers at the moment pushing for the need to make sure your supply chain is guaranteed to you. We've seen the potential risks of supply chain attack and the removal of Huawei kit from a lot of the UK infrastructure. We've seen the impacts, as was mentioned previously, around the withdrawal of services to Russia and the risks that that can bring. But also, things like AI are introducing new elements to your supply chain complexity that haven't been thought of before. It's not just a case of ownership of models. Those models can potentially contain PII that will fall under GDPR, and you have to be more concerned about the location and management of those models. But also the fact that there's a lot of systems becoming dependent on LLMs that are owned primarily by Chinese or American organizations. They are becoming the driving force for a lot of the generative benefits that we get from AI, but there's also limitations there in terms of independence if Europe or the EU requires its own. And I know there are a number of projects on to build those, but we have a big gap there at the moment. Tongue-tied there. Legislative and regulatory independence is really, really important as well. As we've seen from the US Cloud Act, it's been talked about today already, and I've got a slide in a minute, there are a lot of risks to hosting very sensitive information on the hyperscaler infrastructure. One of the examples in the UK is a Scottish police force, not an ANS customer, that was hosting a lot of sensitive information up in Azure. They've been giving guarantees around sovereignty, the fact the Cloud Act didn't apply, but actually there was a big scandal in 24 when they reached out and went, I'm really sorry, actually we can't give you any guarantee. It doesn't apply. And that led to a lot of conversations around what is the right level of data to be storing in the public cloud. Alongside that, you've got things like AI regulation. One of the benefits of technology in the cloud space is it moves really fast. But as we've seen from a lot of the talks today, regulation takes a long time to catch up, and it's really dependent in the territory as to whether it's a very prescriptive or very open interpretation legislation. In AI, the EU is very far ahead of the UK. The AI Act is already in place. The UK has got its action plan in place, but we haven't yet developed regulation. It's likely to be very open-ended legislation with guiding principles, but it means at the moment organizations that are looking to adopt, especially in a sovereign context, have questions that they can't necessarily answer at the moment, and it's leaving a lot of ambiguity where people are looking to necessarily implement some of the more complex technologies. Next up is GDPR. This is actually from David's paper, so I'd recommend going to read it if you get a second. It's a really good article examining the impact of GDPR on sovereign cloud. Within the UK space, when Brexit occurred, all of the EU legislation was immediately copied over into UK legislation, and GDPR became a matter of fact. But Brexit has left the UK in a slightly awkward position where we're straddling different legislative boundaries. So the US Cloud Act can be used, and FISA, to acquire information from non-US entities. The benefit of the UK, we are trying to make sure that we are aligned to the EU standard. We are trying to maintain our third-party status and get access to the systems that we need to, but it also has given us a lot of freedom in terms of our ability to negotiate external legislative exemptions. And we've managed to negotiate with the US on the US Cloud Act to make sure that we can do reciprocal data sharing. So within GDPR, there is the element of consumer data sharing, where there is already parity between legislation and we can conduct business there. We've got the issues around criminal data sharing, which is now covered on the UK side at least by the Cloud Act agreement. But we still have the issues, as David raised earlier, around FISA and the fact that intelligence sharing could still place customers that are on hyperscale clouds in breach of GDPR and data sharing. And it's still a very significant issue when we're looking at customers that are hosting specifically sensitive PII in those environments. Just to pick up on David, actually, on the encryption side, actually completely agree with you on that front. But I think one of the things, if you're looking at the encryption as a barrier for that, is to be aware of post-quantum. So over the next 5 to 10 years, there is the distinct possibility that current generation of encryption will be broken, and there will be speculative queries from intelligence agencies trying to gather data now so that when that comes in, they'll be able to subsequently read your data. So when you're looking at those strategies, last year all of the post-quantum algorithms were ratified. They're going into implementation this year. If you'd like to have a chat afterwards, please do. But we'd recommend when you're looking at your encryption infrastructure to try and get around those approaches, make sure you're looking at a post-quantum solution to that because it will give you a lot more flexibility moving forwards. So one quick thing to have a look at from the UK perspective and what we see from our customers is the right cloud for the right purpose based on your data sensitivity. And that will be very much down to your organization's own preference and marking on its data sensitivity. In the UK, we have 3 main tiers, the first being official and official sensitive. This can be stored overseas. And actually, the government proactively now encourages that. There's a general view within the UK to look at a dual region approach where possible for non-sensitive data in territories that have similar data regimes to ourselves. That is primarily to encourage data resilience, to provide geographic redundancy in the case of outage, link resilience, but you have to make sure that your architecture and your legal requirements meet the necessary stringent data requirements to host that data there. Above that, and this is where we tend to find a lot of our customers moving more into very specialist siloed data centers such as ourselves, is where customers have secret and top secret information. As you saw, we host a number of central government and defense. These have a lot higher classification of data requirements. They have a need for specialist silos, access to core central government, data networks, certified staff, and they will then require additional workloads to be placed within more secure containers. As a result of that, you need to make sure when you're looking at those that we pick the right partner to be able to host that data. And then one final feature bit before I get into how CSPs can help with that is GaiaX. We've talked a lot today around hybrid cloud, the need to consolidate data together, but one of the things that we still struggle with is how we can compete against the hyperscalers. There's been a lot of talk within VMware of the fact that EMEA especially, if we fought together, effectively are the 4th hyperscaler. And there's a lot of work in industry at the moment looking at how services can interoperate. Even within the sovereign environment, following the same encryption standards, under the same legal frameworks, there are efforts such as GaiaX to look at how the hyperscalers can start to cooperate more. This is starting to come to fruition. I don't think the technology is quite there yet, and there's still a lot of agreement within the industry to get to a point where we can get to an executable position. But frameworks like GaiaX are getting to a point where you'll be able to consume services from multiple service providers under one homogeneous banner and give you the flexibility to transfer your data within a federated and compliant environment. Unfortunately for the UK, GaiaX is EU only. The EU gave the UK a chance to enter that framework. Unfortunately, at the time, we decided not to. There are a number of competing ways looking to homogenize the cloud environment. GaiaX is the predominant one within the EU. The G7 have their own framework that they're building out at the moment to look at cloud interoperability, and it will be interesting to see how that develops over the next 5 years. But also within the UK, there is a push both for our own standards, but then also to try and integrate with GaiaX. One of the things we're excited for at the moment, Open UK has been lobbying the UK government for the introduction of the UK into GaiaX. That seems to be getting a lot more traction. They've just released the UK Data Hub as an alternative route into the data clearing houses. So there's a lot more future options there for where we might be going. So, where does that lead us? Cloud's very complex. We've got a sudden growth in exponential growth in service adoption. We've got SaaS services, we've got AI, we've got other systems that need to be integrated very completely to be able to deliver correctly. Bringing sovereign in means that we have to do that with an isolated, regulated, and controlled environment. It's given us increased speed in innovation. It's given us increased speed of delivery. But with that has brought massive increase in complexity and control. When we had the panel discussion earlier, we saw the heated debate and the balance between regulation and freedom to innovate. But the regulation now is at a point where you can't necessarily manage that on your own. We deal with a range of service providers, from large government organizations all the way down to local councils. But a lot of the challenges that they face are the same. The resources each of them have is very different. And it means implementing sovereign cloud can be very tricky if you don't have a reliable partner that can help integrate and bring those together. You've got to look at your staff accreditation. You've got to look at your migration planning and support. You've got to look at the ongoing management of the environment and the vendor management. As we saw earlier, it's not just about one vendor. It's not just about two vendors anymore. The large, complex cloud implementations can have 10, 20, 30, 40 vendors that somehow you've got to integrate into your management and planning. And that's really where the managed CSP comes into its own. And it's something that we've seen a lot of our customers value in their adoption of cloud platforms as the technology's developed. CSPs like myself, like Soprasteria, have been there to help guide and provide that additional support and help as these solutions develop. CSPs can help offload a lot of the challenges around the adoption of sovereignty. There's a lot of industry resource that is available to help in the architecture and design, but then also in the long-term management and growth of the environments. That's not just around the single environment that you're looking at in the point of time, but going back to what we called the swoosh earlier, it's about your transition and adoption of cloud. You want to make sure when you're looking to adopt sovereign cloud, you're picking a partner that can be there for the lifetime and the ecosystem that you're trying to adopt. They will provide cleared and managed personnel. You can get pre-built managed solutions in data centers that are already set up and connected to the relevant networks, cutting months or years off your product delivery. So in summary, regulations are very rapidly maturing. There's very significant and growing demand. Governments and organizations are seeing the benefits of the speed and the scale that can be delivered. We're seeing some fantastic and innovative solutions being pushed out across the ecosystem, and with AI, that's only growing faster. Cloud is no longer siloed. It is really a complex web of different services. Trying to deliver that in a sovereign fashion can be very difficult. Stacks like VCF can help with that considerably because a lot of the hyperscale functions are being brought into those. It's complex and expanding across many sectors. A lot of our customers aren't working in individual silos. You can see the health service collaborating with the police, collaborating with central government, and those systems need to interoperate. And sovereign cloud requires a deep partnership to be able to execute successfully, to be able to manage that development as it's being pushed through, and to maintain your ecosystem as the environment evolves. Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you.
Oh, is this working? Yes. Thank you so much. We've
Thank
got
you.
questions
Oh, right,
from the
okay.
chat, and we also have a little bit of time, so we might take one or two in the audience if you have
Promise I'll
any.
get before coffee.
No, we're on time. We're perfectly on time. So first question is, how do you balance the specific customer sovereignty needs and the bigger information sharing within the country between agencies?
I think that can be quite complex, and it depends on the agencies. Especially in the UK, a lot of our agencies already have interagency cooperation agreements. We have 4 or 5 key main networks that they can then communicate on. One of the benefits that we have as a service provider is we provide access to all core government networks. So that level of facilitation really comes down to an organizational agreement rather than any sort of technological barriers.
Mm-hmm. That was a question from Roy Isley. I hope I'm saying this correctly. Is this someone in the room or someone online? Yes. Does it answer the question?
Sort of when you go cross-border.
Can we get you? We're going to get you a mic if you want to. Yeah. Over there.
I was thinking, not just within the UK, but cross-border, when you've got agencies such as the police with agreements between countries, how you make the sovereignty work with exchanging information in that sort of situation.
It can be very complex, and it depends which organizations are talking and between which countries. Where it's within the UK and the EU, and we have data adequacy already, it's quite simple. Just traditional standard encryption will hold. It will then depend where we're talking to. If it's an organization that's not in a third-party country, we'll have to have the data adequacy agreements in place. A lot of that will come down to a legislative agreement rather than a technological solution, but we would work in partnership with them to make sure that that was in place.
Thank you very much. And we've got another question from Anonymous. Can you explain what is ANS's approach on cybersecurity, especially in critical sectors like the NHS and local government? Can zero trust be the best concept in this area?
I think zero trust has to be. For us, defense is no longer something that's done at the perimeter. Defense is in depth and must be done at every level of the solution. Within sovereign cloud, more so. I think the NHS, where you've got patient data, it's really important that you have that level of visibility. We offer and recommend tiered services, managed SOC, SIEM, antivirus integration at every level of the platform, along with the IPS, IDS integration both at the edge and filtered within. For us, it's not about necessarily that one intruder. You need to make the assumption that the environment is compromised from the beginning, but have the visibility there to make sure you can capture that, stop it quickly, and then remediate afterwards.
Thank you very much. I hope that answers the question, whomever it was. Yes, we'll take another one from Guy.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Just a quick question about data classification.
Yep.
So identifying where the data can be based on the criticality and the classification of data. Whilst there's systems out there to helpfully identify PII information, because it's quite easy to find, how do you go about helping customers identify different types of classification?
Unfortunately for that, it will be on the customer. So there are obviously systems like Purview and AWS, Azure even, that can help with that in the public cloud space. In the private cloud space, it's very difficult. Where we're talking about nationally sensitive information, that will always be something that we will work with the customer on, but it will have to be controlled by them as they're the data controller.
Yes, last one.
Thank you, Chris. My name's Rahil Nasser. I'm from IDC. One of your slides, Chris, spoke about the clearances that are required, and it made me think about, we've seen some sovereign cloud offerings from the global cloud providers, and one of the things they sort of often stipulate is that your data is only accessed by EU residents, and I've often thought, well, that doesn't guard against bad actors, and you need more stringent vetting procedures for, especially in a sovereign environment. Would you agree with that? Do you think we need government standard vetting procedures for all operational personnel who are accessing, your data in a sovereign cloud environment?
I think it's very much dependent on the level of classification of the data. I think that's why we're very successful in the approach where it's the right technology for the right workload. So we, for example, the classified Ministry of Defence systems sit within a siloed private cloud environment, whereas we have other systems for customers where there isn't personal data and it's an open website where that can quite happily sit up in Azure or AWS without any impact. I think when you're starting to get into the siloed critical national infrastructure, there are legal requirements around that already. So, for example, all of ours, they are only UK personnel. They are vetted to SC or DV, dependent on the nature of the environment. So we already have those sort of safeguards in place that if it's that level of protection that you require, and it is down to UK eyes only in our instance, with the relevant clearance, that will already be in place. And there are processes and policies in place to make sure that people that aren't at that level and have no need to be on those systems can't access them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you very much. Cheers, everyone. Enjoy your coffee.